The rhythmic thrum of a C-130 transport plane echoed through the early morning haze over Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, the legendary training ground of the U.S. Navy SEALs. The Pacific wind carried a sharp bite, and gulls circled lazily over the glimmering waves as the aircraft touched down with the squeal of tires. Stepping out onto the tarmac, Captain Amelia Rhodes adjusted her cap against the glare of the California sun. Her crisp Air Force blues contrasted sharply against the camouflage-clad SEALs jogging past in formation. Their heads turned, some curious, others skeptical, as they caught sight of her. A few whispered under their breath, "Air Force?" One muttered, "Wrong base, sweetheart." Another smirked. Amelia didn't flinch. Her eyes, a cool shade of steel gray, swept across the runway before she picked up her duffel and started toward the hangar. Her steps were measured, calm, too calm for a place where chaos was the daily rhythm. She wasn't here to make impressions. She was here to do her job. Inside the main operations building, the scent of coffee and engine oil filled the air. Maps of the Pacific lined the walls, dotted with pins marking covert routes and target zones. Every inch of the base pulsed with discipline and pride, and suspicion of outsiders. Behind a wide oak desk sat Admiral Ross Harkins, a man whose reputation was as rigid as the metals on his chest. Decades of command had carved deep lines into his weathered face. When he heard the knock at his door, he didn't look up. "Come in," he said curtly, still reviewing the day's logistics schedule. Amelia stepped inside and snapped to attention. "Captain Amelia Rhodes, U.S. Air Force, reporting as ordered, sir." The Admiral raised his head slowly, eyes narrowing as he took in her uniform. "Air Force?" His voice carried a rough edge. "What in God's name is an Air Force officer doing at my base?" "Joint Operations Command reassigned me, sir," she said evenly. "I'm here to coordinate air support for your SEAL units during the upcoming maritime drills." He leaned back, unimpressed. "You're telling me they sent an Air Force captain, a woman, to train Navy SEALs on air coordination?" He chuckled dryly. "That's rich." Amelia didn't react. She'd heard it all before, from instructors, from rivals, even from her own pilots before they learned better. "With respect, sir," she replied, "I'm not here to train your men. I'm here to make sure they get home alive." That silenced the room for a beat too long. The Admiral exhaled through his nose, irritation flashing in his eyes. "You'll report to Hangar C for the morning briefing. Don't expect anyone to roll out the red carpet." "Yes, sir." She turned on her heel and exited, leaving him glaring after her. Outside, the morning was alive with movement. SEAL teams practicing insertion drills, instructors shouting over engines, and the distant hum of helicopters slicing through the air. Amelia stopped near the runway, watching them with quiet respect. She admired the SEALs. They were the kind of soldiers who didn't flinch under pressure, who ran toward gunfire when others ran away. But she also knew what few outsiders did, that even the toughest warriors sometimes forgot how fragile life could be without the eyes of the sky watching over them. Her thoughts drifted to another sky, black with smoke, over the mountains of Syria. A voice over the radio screaming coordinates. Her F-22 slicing through chaos as missiles locked onto her tail. She could still feel the vibration in her bones, still hear the static-filled voice of the SEAL commander she refused to leave behind. "Valkyrie, we're pinned down." "Abort. That's an order." And her voice, calm and cold as ice. "Not a chance. I've got you." She blinked once, clearing the memory like a ghost vanishing into the mist. That was years ago. Another world. Another version of her. One buried beneath protocol and silence. At precisely 0800 hours, the Joint Operations Briefing began. The room was filled with SEAL officers and a handful of intelligence analysts. Maps were projected on the screen, ocean grids, flight patterns, extraction zones. Amelia stood near the corner, quietly observing. When Admiral Harkins entered, the room snapped to attention. "At ease," he barked. He gave his overview briskly, then gestured toward the Air Force liaison. "Captain Rhodes, was it? You may speak." Amelia stepped forward. Her voice was steady. "Yes, sir. The Air Force will be coordinating with your teams for aerial reconnaissance during coastal drills. We'll be running F-22 Raptors and F-35 support over." The Admiral interrupted with a scoff. "Recon? We don't need fancy jets to tell us how to swim, Captain. My men don't depend on air babysitters." A few SEALs chuckled. Others looked down, uncomfortable. Amelia met his eyes. "With respect, sir, the ocean doesn't care how tough anyone is. If a storm rolls in or visibility drops, air support is the difference between coming home and being a name on a memorial." A murmur rippled through the room. She had spoken quietly, but every word carried weight. The Admiral's jaw tightened. "You're out of line. Just factual, sir." The silence after that was deafening. Harkins slammed his folder shut. "This briefing is over. Captain Rhodes, you're relieved of duty. I want you off my base by sundown." The words hit like a hammer, but Amelia didn't flinch. She stood there for a second, then saluted sharply. "Understood, sir." Without another word, she walked out, her boots echoing against the concrete floor. The SEALs watched her go, an uneasy mixture of guilt and admiration in their eyes. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying the salty scent of the Pacific. Amelia stopped at the edge of the tarmac, staring out toward the endless horizon. A helicopter rose in the distance, its rotors slicing through the dawn light. For a moment, she imagined being back in her cockpit, hands gripping the controls, heart steady, mind locked in that razor-sharp clarity only the sky could bring. She closed her eyes. The Admiral's order stung, but not because of pride. She'd spent her whole career earning respect the hard way, mission after mission, each one pushing her further than the last. What hurt wasn't his words. It was that she'd expected it. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the base in molten gold, Amelia sat alone by the hangar, running her fingers along the edge of her flight helmet. Its paint was scratched, its visor worn. Across the side, faded but still visible, was her call sign, Valkyrie. Few people knew what that name truly meant, or what it had cost her to earn it. She had flown through storms most pilots wouldn't dare approach. She had disobeyed direct orders to save lives, and she had faced the consequences in silence. Tomorrow, she would leave the space quietly, as she always did. But somewhere deep inside, she knew fate wasn't done with her yet. Because legends don't fade, they wait for the sky to call again. The next morning at Coronado Base began with the roar of engines and the sharp calls of instructors, barking commands over the hum of waves. But inside the operations building, the air was cold, tense, and heavy with unspoken friction. Captain Amelia Rhodes arrived early. She'd spent half the night reviewing maps and simulations, trying to refine the air-to-sea coordination plans for the joint drill. She wasn't one to brood over insults or orders. She believed in letting performance speak for her. But deep down, she sensed the Admiral's hostility wasn't going away quietly. The smell of black coffee and jet fuel filled the narrow corridors. Conversations halted as she passed, not with open disrespect, but with that uneasy silence soldiers used when they didn't know whether to salute or scoff. "Morning, Captain," said one of the flight engineers awkwardly. She nodded politely. "Morning." He hesitated before adding, "Admiral's called for another briefing. You might want to be prepared." "Prepared for what?" she asked, pausing. He looked at the floor. He didn't sound happy. Rhodes offered a faint smile. He never does. In the command room, Admiral Ross Harkins stood at the head of the table, arms folded, eyes hard as steel. His silver hair gleamed under the fluorescent light. Around him sat a dozen Navy officers, their folders open, waiting. When Rhodes entered, the room's energy shifted again. Whispers, shuffling papers, a few smirks. The Admiral didn't invite her to sit. "Captain," he said flatly, "since you're still on my base, let's make something clear." Rhodes straightened. "Sir, I reviewed your proposed flight coordination plan," he said, tapping the papers in front of him. "And frankly, it's unnecessary. My men don't need a skybound babysitter telling them how to handle a storm." "With respect, sir," she replied, her voice measured, "these drills involve high-risk extraction maneuvers. Air coverage could mean the difference between losing a man and bringing everyone home." The Admiral's jaw tightened. "We've been doing this long before your Raptors came along, Captain." "And you've lost men doing it," she countered, too quickly. The silence that followed was razor-sharp. Even the hum of the projector seemed to fade. Admiral Harkins slowly lowered his glasses. "What did you just say?" Rhodes didn't flinch. "Sir, I reviewed past debriefs. In multiple coastal training ops, visibility dropped and extraction times doubled without aerial support. My team can... Enough!" He barked, slamming a fist on the table. Papers fluttered. "You are not here to critique my command or question my record." For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. The Admiral's face flushed red. Rhodes's expression remained calm, her posture unbroken. She'd seen worse, in war zones, in the air, in the eyes of officers who mistook silence for submission. "Sir," she said quietly, "I'm not questioning your record. I'm trying to prevent new ones." The words hit him like a slap. Around the table, a few SEALs looked up, admiration flickering behind their disciplined stares. Harkins pointed toward the door. "Get out, sir." "You heard me. You are relieved of this assignment. I want you off my base by 1800 hours." Rhodes blinked once, the only sign she'd even registered the order. "Understood," she said, voice firm. She turned sharply, saluted, and walked out. The corridor outside felt colder now. She moved with steady steps, her boots echoing down the polished hallways. But behind the stoicism, her mind raced, not with anger, but with calculation. She'd been removed before, reassigned, misunderstood. It came with being different, not just a woman in a fighter cockpit, but someone who carried secrets few would ever understand. At the end of the corridor, she stopped by a large window overlooking the sea. The morning sun reflected on the waves like liquid glass. A group of SEALs ran drills below, their synchronized movements sharp and powerful. They were some of the finest soldiers on Earth. And yet, she knew, in battle, even the strongest needed eyes above the clouds. "Captain?" She turned. A young Navy lieutenant stood awkwardly behind her, clean-shaven, maybe mid-20s. "Ma'am, I just wanted to say, what happened in there wasn't right." Rhodes gave a faint, patient smile. "That's the chain of command, Lieutenant." He hesitated. "Still, I read your file. Your flight records are, well, unbelievable. You flew through anti-air fire in Aleppo too." She cut him off softly. "That file's classified." The young man flushed. "Sorry, ma'am. It's just... the Admiral doesn't know who you are." "Then it's best he doesn't," she said, and walked away. By noon, word had spread. The Air Force captain, the outsider, had been kicked off base. Some laughed quietly, some pitied her. But a few, the older SEALs especially, exchanged uncertain glances. One of them, Chief Petty Officer Grant Morales, paused mid-conversation when he heard her name. "Rhodes?" He muttered, brow furrowing. "Wait." Did she ever fly under a call sign? Another SEAL shrugged. No idea. Why? Morales stared at his coffee, memory flickering in his eyes. Because back in Syria, our air cover was a woman pilot. Call sign Valkyrie. She broke every protocol to get us out alive. Saved 8 of us when the evac bird went down. She vanished after that. Rumor was command grounded her for disobeying orders. The younger SEALs leaned in, wide-eyed. You think it's her? Morales didn't answer, but his silence spoke louder than words. Meanwhile, in her temporary quarters, Rhodes quietly packed her few belongings. A flight jacket, her helmet, and a single-framed photo of her old squadron. Her movements were precise, efficient, emotionless. But when she reached for her helmet, her fingers paused. Scratched across its surface, half-faded from years of missions, was her old call sign, Valkyrie. For a long moment, she just stared at it, the name she'd earned not from superiors, but from those she saved. The name that had followed her like a ghost ever since that night in the desert, when she'd chosen men's lives over command orders. Her lips curved slightly. Still flying, she murmured under her breath. A knock interrupted the moment. Enter, she said. A Marine courier stepped in, stiff as a statue. Orders from command, ma'am. She opened the envelope. The message was brief. Reassignment pending. Await transfer confirmation. In short, forgotten again. Thank you, she said, tucking it away. When he left, she sat on the edge of the cot, elbows on her knees, staring at the floor. She had served long enough to know respect was never given freely, especially to those who broke the mold. But she also knew something else. History had a way of forcing people to see the truth, whether they wanted to or not. Outside, clouds rolled in from the Pacific, dimming the sky. The wind howled between hangars, carrying the scent of salt and rain. Down by the runway, SEALs jogged past, glancing her way but saying nothing. She watched them, quietly respectful, warriors who would never know how much she'd risked for men like them. When she turned to leave, one voice called after her. Captain. She looked back. It was Chief Morales. He jogged up, panting slightly, eyes burning with something between awe and disbelief. Ma'am, your call sign. Is it Valkyrie? The question hung heavy in the air. For a moment, Rhodes didn't answer. The storm clouds above rumbled, thunder rolling across the horizon. Finally, she said quietly, Not anymore. And then she walked away. From the control tower above, Admiral Harkins watched her cross the tarmac, duffel in hand, the wind whipping her hair as the first drops of rain began to fall. Something in his gut twisted, a flicker of doubt, or maybe shame. He didn't yet know why his chest felt tight. But soon, very soon, he would. Because the legend of Valkyrie was about to rise again. And when it did, every SEAL, every pilot, and even the Admiral himself would remember the day he tried to ground a storm. The rain came in sideways that evening, pounding against the tin roofs of the barracks. The storm rolled across the Pacific, turning the sky a bruised gray. Inside the mess hall, laughter and the clatter of trays filled the space, the nightly ritual of SEALs winding down after brutal training days. But that night, the laughter had an edge. Can you believe it? One of the younger SEALs snorted, shaking his head. The Admiral kicked that Air Force lady off base. Guess she couldn't handle real training. The table erupted in low chuckles. She probably got lost trying to find the runway, another joked. But not everyone laughed. At the far end of the table sat Chief Petty Officer Grant Morales, a weathered veteran of over a dozen missions, quiet, sharp-eyed, and respected. His fork paused mid-her. Something about the name Rhodes kept echoing in his mind. What did you say her name was again? He asked without looking up. Rhodes, the young SEAL said, still grinning. Captain Amelia Rhodes. Air Force hotshot. Morales set his fork down slowly. His gaze drifted toward the rain streaking down the window, a flash of memory breaking through the sound of thunder. A dusty airfield. A desperate voice on comms. The chaos of gunfire echoing across a Syrian canyon. Valkyrie, we're trapped. We need cover fire. Copy that. Mark your smoke. I'm coming in hot. He remembered her voice, calm, smooth, almost unnervingly steady, even as missiles exploded around her jet. He remembered the sound of her F-22 screaming overhead, cutting through the storm like a blade through silk. And he remembered the moment their extraction bird lifted off, how she stayed behind in the sky until every single man was safe. He blinked hard, pulling himself back to the present. You said, Rhodes? Yeah, why? Morales's voice dropped to a whisper. Call sign? The young SEAL frowned. No clue. Why does it matter? Morales stared into his coffee. Because I think I've heard that name before. Years ago. By the time the rain stopped, word had already started to spread. Across the base, in the hangars, in the gym, in the barracks, quiet conversations replaced the usual banter. SEALs who'd fought in Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan began connecting dots. Wait, you mean that Valkyrie? One asked. The one who defied orders during Iron Dusk? Another whispered. No way. That was a ghost story. Nobody ever confirmed who she was. But the more they talked, the clearer it became. The timelines matched, the details aligned, and the description fit perfectly. By 2,200 hours, almost every operator on base knew the rumor. The Air Force captain the Admiral had thrown out wasn't just any pilot. She was the legendary F-22 call sign, Valkyrie. In her quarters, Captain Rhodes sat at the edge of her bunk, reviewing her transfer papers by the dim light of a desk lamp. Outside, the rain had slowed to a whisper against the glass. She heard footsteps approach before there was a knock at the door. Come in, she said. The door creaked open, revealing Chief Morales. His uniform was still damp from the storm, his expression a strange mix of awe and caution. Evening, ma'am, he said quietly. Chief, she replied, setting down her folder. What can I do for you? He hesitated. I need to ask you something straight. Go ahead. He met her eyes. Were you in Syria? Operation Iron Dusk? Her breath caught for just a fraction of a second. That's classified. That's not a no. Rhodes sighed softly. Chief, what are you trying to say? He stepped closer. I was there. My team was trapped in the Al-Harir Canyon. We were surrounded, and command called off air support. We thought we were done. Then a Raptor came out of nowhere, took out the enemy batteries, and stayed overhead for 40 minutes, after running out of ammo. The pilot called herself Valkyrie. Her expression stayed unreadable, but her silence spoke volumes. Morales exhaled slowly. It was you, wasn't it? Rhodes looked down, fingers tracing the edge of her flight jacket. Doesn't matter who it was, Chief. What matters is you made it home. He shook his head. No, it does matter. You saved us. And now that same Admiral, who's wearing our flag on his chest, threw you out like a rookie. Her voice stayed calm. He doesn't know. And he doesn't need to. Morales's jaw tightened. The men need to. They deserve to know who you are. I'm not a hero, Chief, she said firmly. Heroes don't break orders. They don't spend 6 months grounded afterward. He gave a small, sad laugh. Funny, every man you saved would say the opposite. For a long moment, the two stood in silence, soldier and pilot, both bound by memories, they'd never put into words. Finally, Rhodes said quietly, "Let it go, Chief. The sky doesn't care about names." But Morales didn't let it go. By the next morning, the rumor wasn't a rumor anymore. It was gospel. The SEALs had confirmed it through old mission chatter, flight logs, and personal accounts. The pilot who had once been only a legend, whispered about around campfires in faraway war zones, was right here, and their own Admiral had dismissed her. Everywhere Rhodes went that morning, the atmosphere was different. Men who had once ignored her now stood at attention when she passed. Whispers followed her like an echo. "Valkyrie. That's her. She's the one who saved Morales's team." But Rhodes barely acknowledged it. She kept her eyes forward, posture steady. Respect wasn't what she was here for. Still, the air was charged. Something had changed. In the Admiral's office, the tension had reached a boiling point. "Sir," his aide stammered, "there's something you need to see." Harkins looked up, irritated. "What is it now?" The aide placed a manila folder on his desk. A report from Joint Operations Archives. Someone requested confirmation about a pilot with the call sign Valkyrie. I cross-checked the file. Harkins frowned and opened it. Inside were declassified mission summaries from Operation Iron Dusk. His eyes scanned line after line. SEAL Team 6 extraction successful. Enemy anti-air systems neutralized by F-22 Raptor. Pilot defied direct recall order to continue covering ground team. The final note froze his blood. Pilot call sign, Valkyrie. Name, Captain Amelia Rhodes. He leaned back slowly, disbelief written across his face. He had ordered off his base one of the most decorated and legendary combat pilots alive, the same woman whose disobedience had once saved America's most elite soldiers. For the first time in years, Admiral Harkins felt something he hadn't in decades: shame. By evening, as the sun dipped low over the Pacific, Rhodes stood on the runway, helmet under her arm. The air was quiet, eerily so. SEALs moving between hangars would pause to nod respectfully, but she barely noticed. Her thoughts were elsewhere, somewhere far beyond the clouds. Chief Morales approached again, this time with several SEALs behind him. "Captain," he said, "we wanted to say thank you. For Iron Dusk, for everything." She gave a small nod. "You don't owe me anything." "Maybe not," Morales said, "but we remember who we owe our lives to." He extended his hand. After a brief hesitation, she shook it. Around them, the wind shifted, soft but powerful, carrying the promise of change. The Admiral watched from a distance, his jaw tight, his pride unraveling. He could see it now, the quiet authority, the command presence, the weight of experience in her eyes. He'd misjudged her, not just as a pilot, but as a soldier. And soon, he would have no choice but to face the truth head-on. Because when fate calls the name Valkyrie, even admirals learn to listen. Morning sunlight cut through the blinds of Admiral Harkins' office, falling in sharp lines across his desk. The once proud stars on his shoulders suddenly felt heavier than they ever had. The folder sat open before him, the classified file that had erased every ounce of certainty from his mind. He read it again and again, as if repetition might somehow change what it said. But the facts stayed the same, unrelenting. Pilot, Captain Amelia Rhodes. Call sign, Valkyrie. Mission, Operation Iron Dusk, classified successful. Casualties prevented, 22 U.S. Navy SEALs. Enemy units neutralized, 46. Direct orders broken, 1. 1 disobedience. 1 act of defiance that saved lives and ended her career's upward climb. Harkins leaned back, exhaling hard. What have I done? He dismissed her in front of his entire command, humiliated her for a jurisdictional technicality. And now he realized that the woman he'd ordered off base had more honor, grit, and valor than most of the men under his command combined. Still, part of him resisted the feeling of guilt. Regulations are regulations, he told himself. Discipline holds the line. But another part, the one buried deep under decades of rank and politics, whispered back, discipline didn't save those SEALs. She did. Outside, the base buzzed differently. Word had spread far beyond rumor now. Across the tarmac, operators and pilots alike moved with quiet reverence. Every conversation circled back to one name, Valkyrie. In the mess hall, men who'd once doubted her now shared stories about the mission they never knew was real. I heard she flew with her oxygen down to 15% just to stay on station. They say she dodged 2 surface-to-air missiles in one run. No. Man, she looped around after her ammo ran dry and used her afterburner to distract the last SAM. The stories grew larger by the hour. But none of them exaggerated the truth. She had, in fact, done it all. Captain Rhodes, meanwhile, had retreated to the hangar. She stood alone beside her Raptor, tracing her fingers along its sleek metal skin. To her, the jet wasn't a machine. It was memory, loss, and solace combined. The hangar lights flickered softly above her. The hum of silence filled the air. Chief Morales appeared at the entrance. "Ma'am," he said gently, "the Admiral's looking for you." She didn't turn. Let him look. He hesitated. He knows. That made her pause. Slowly, she faced him. Knows what? Everything. Iron Dusk, Valkyrie, the SEALs, the cover-up, all of it. Rhodes exhaled slowly, her jaw tightening. So the secret's dead. Maybe, Morales said. Or maybe it's finally free. When Admiral Harkins finally stepped into the hangar, the metallic clang of his boots echoed through the vast space. For a man known for his arrogance and precision, his stride was slower than usual, weighted with something he wasn't used to carrying, remorse. Rhodes didn't salute. She didn't even move. "Captain Rhodes," he began. "Admiral," she said flatly, "if this is about my departure, I'll be off your base by 1600 hours. "This isn't about that," he said. His voice was calm, but edged with strain. "It's about Iron Dusk." She finally turned toward him, her gaze steady and cold. "That's classified, sir." "I know," Harkins admitted. "And I read the file anyway." A long silence followed. The sound of distant engines filled the gap between them. "I didn't know who you were," he said finally. "If I had..." Rhodes cut him off sharply. "If you had, you still would have followed the book. That's what admirals do." He frowned. "You think I'm proud of what I did?" She shrugged. "Pride doesn't matter. Orders do." Harkins took a step closer. "You saved 22 men, Captain. You broke the chain of command, yes, but you did it for the right reason. And for that, I owe you more than an apology." Her expression didn't soften. "With respect, sir, I didn't do it for you. I did it because those men called for help, and someone had to answer." Harkins nodded slowly. "That's exactly why they call you Valkyrie." For a moment, the hangar fell into silence again. 2 soldiers from 2 different worlds, one built on hierarchy, the other on instinct, stood face to face, bound by the same oath, but divided by their ways of living it. Later that day, a briefing was called, unannounced, unplanned, but impossible to ignore. The entire base assembled inside the main operations hall. Rows of SEALs, pilots, and staff officers filled the seats. The air was thick with curiosity and tension. At the front, Admiral Harkins stood behind the podium. His expression was unreadable. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice steady but low, "I've called this assembly to address a matter that concerns the integrity of this command and the honor of one of our own. A ripple went through the crowd. Harkins continued, "Yesterday, I made a decision based on protocol. I dismissed Captain Amelia Rhodes from this base due to jurisdictional misalignment. What I did not realize, and what I now deeply regret, is that Captain Rhodes is not just any pilot. She is the pilot who, during Operation Iron Dusk, defied orders to save the lives of 22 Navy SEALs." Gasps filled the hall. Every SEAL who doubted her earlier now looked at her with a mix of shock and admiration. Harkins's voice cracked slightly. "I've spent my career teaching men and women to follow orders. But sometimes rare individuals remind us that courage isn't just obedience, it's conviction. Captain Rhodes demonstrated that conviction when it mattered most. For that, she has my respect. And she should have yours." He stepped aside. "Captain, if you'd like to say something?" Every eye in the hall turned to her. Rhodes walked forward slowly, her flight suit still smudged with oil and dust. She didn't use the podium. She just stood there, calm, composed, unshaken. "I don't have a speech," she said simply. "All I ever wanted was to serve. Not to be remembered, not to be saluted, just to do my job. That night in Syria, I didn't act out of bravery. I acted because someone needed help. And if I had to do it again, I would, orders or not." Her voice grew softer. "Because sometimes, the hardest battles aren't fought in the sky. They're fought between what's right and what's allowed." For a long moment, the hall was silent. Then, one by one, the SEALs stood up. No words, no applause. Just silent respect, the kind soldiers give only to those who've earned it the hard way. When the briefing ended, Harkins approached her quietly. "You have a flight scheduled, don't you?" "Yes, sir," she said. "One last one?" He nodded. "Then fly, Captain. You don't need permission anymore." She gave a faint smile, the first he'd seen from her, and turned toward the runway. As the engines roared to life, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky gold and crimson. The F-22 lifted into the air, cutting across the clouds like a blade of light. Down below, the Admiral watched, the name Valkyrie echoing in his mind. For the first time, he understood why even the toughest SEALs fell silent when they heard it. Because Valkyrie wasn't just a call sign. It was a promise. A promise that when the sky turned dark and the world fell quiet, she would still be there. Watching, guarding, flying. 3 days after the briefing, the base seemed to breathe easier. The tension that had once hung over every corridor had thinned. Crews saluted Captain Rhodes, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. She wished it felt better. Recognition, she realized, was a fragile thing, loud one moment, gone the next. She spent her mornings inside the simulator bay, running quiet drills. She wasn't chasing glory. She was trying to stay sharp. Old instincts didn't fade easily, and neither did ghosts. Chief Morale still stopped by each evening with coffee and news. "The guys won't stop talking about you," he said once, setting a mug on her console. "Half of them want you to run their next air support cycle." Rhodes smiled faintly. "They'd hate me after one sortie. I don't play nice with ground radios." "Yeah," he said, chuckling. "That's exactly why they want you." But beneath the banter lay something else. A tension she could feel in the chief's tone, in the guarded glances of the operations staff. Something was happening behind closed doors. The briefing at 0400 hours. An emergency alert echoed across the base. Command assembly immediate. Every ranking officer reported to the ops building, bleary-eyed but alert. Admiral Harkins stood at the front, his face drawn tight. Behind him, a satellite projection flickered to life. A desert valley, heat signatures scattered across its ridges. 2 hours ago, he began, a reconnaissance drone went dark over the Al-Shakr corridor. That's deep-range territory no-fly zone. Someone in the room muttered, That's Syrian airspace again. Harkins nodded grimly. Yes, and before we lost the feed, the drone captured this. He clicked a remote. The image zoomed in. A convoy of vehicles, heavily armed, surrounding a downed U.S. transport helo. Black Hawk call sign Falcon 3. Crash-landed during extraction. 11 personnel alive, pinned by insurgents with anti-air capability. They'll last maybe 4 hours. The room fell silent. Everyone knew what that meant. The region's locked down, Harkins continued. No carrier support, no air corridors cleared. Command wants eyes in the sky, immediately. And the only aircraft fast enough to make it in and out before sunrise. He didn't finish. Every gaze shifted toward Rhodes, standing in the back. She straightened slowly. Sir, you can't mean. He met her eyes. We don't have anyone else cleared for stealth incursion at that altitude. You're the only one who's done it before. Rhodes felt the weight of the moment settle on her chest. It had been years since Iron Dusk. Years since she'd sworn never to fly a live combat op again. Permission to speak freely, sir? Granted. You know why that mission worked? Because I broke every rule in the book. You really want to hand me another rule book tonight? Harkins gave a dry, humorless smile. I want those men alive, Captain. Do whatever you have to. They returned to the sky. The hangar roared with controlled chaos as technicians prepped the Raptor. Fuel lines hissed. Diagnostics blinked green. The scent of jet fuel and cold metal filled the air. Morales jogged beside her, handing over a flight tablet. Updated coordinates. Target grid marked in red. You've got 2 drones feeding thermal overlays. Sam's on the ridges here and here. She scanned the screen. They'll expect a standard ingress pattern. That's why you're not flying one, he said. She smirked. Guess I'm back to being Valkyrie. He stopped her before she climbed the ladder. Hey, he said quietly. You don't have to prove anything. She looked down at him. I'm not proving anything, Chief. I'm keeping a promise. The canopy sealed with a heavy hiss. Engines spooled up, the sound rising to a scream that rattled the hangar doors. At 5:27, the Raptor thundered down the runway and disappeared into the pre-dawn dark. Into the storm 30 minutes later, Rhodes crossed the border. Her HUD flickered with static as she dropped below radar coverage. The valley stretched ahead, a maze of jagged cliffs lit by intermittent flashes of gunfire. Command, this is Valkyrie, she whispered. I have visual on Falcon 3. The reply crackled with interference. Copy. Proceed at discretion. She rolled the jet, inverted, and dove through a slit between ridges, hugging the terrain so tight her altimeter screamed warnings. The Raptor's stealth coating shimmered faintly in the heat haze. Below, insurgent trucks clustered near the wreckage. She armed her first payload 2 JDA MIZ and released them in a smooth rhythm. The explosions bloomed orange against the dawn. The radio erupted. This is Falcon 3. Whoever you are, thank God. Stay low, she replied. Cover's not clear yet. A missile warning flared red across her HUD. A shoulder-launched SAM streaked upward. She banked hard, the G-forces slamming her back into the seat. Countermeasures deployed. Flares burst behind her like falling stars. Nice try, she muttered. But not today. The choice then she saw at one more truck, emerging from a cave tunnel, another missile tube on its roof. Her targeting system flickered. Lock failure. Too much interference. Instinct took over. She dropped flares, cut power, and flipped the jet into a near-vertical descent manual control only. The Raptor screamed through the canyon at supersonic speed, alarms howling. Rhodes. Harkins's voice broke through the combs. You're off trajectory. Abort. Negative, she snapped. They'll fire again if I pull out now. She triggered her last missile manually, guiding it by eye. The impact lit the cliffside like sunrise. Silence followed, brief, heavy, absolute. Then, Falcon 3 to Valkyrie. Hostiles neutralized. We're moving to evac zone. Rhodes exhaled, letting the adrenaline drain away. Copy that. You're clear. The fall on her climb out. A sharp jolt rattled the fuselage. Warning lights flared. Hydraulic failure. One of the earlier blasts had clipped her stabilizer. Command, Valkyrie hit. Losing lateral control. Harkins's voice came instantly. You're 20 miles out? Can you make it? Maybe. The jet shook violently as she fought the stick. She rerouted systems manually, every movement slow and precise. At 10 miles out, the engine sputtered. She was gliding now dead stick. Below, the ocean glimmered like dark glass. Eject, Captain. Negative. I can land it. Rhodes, that's an order. She smiled faintly. You really want to start that argument again, sir? He laughed once, helplessly, through the static. The runway came into view, just a strip of light through the morning fog. She adjusted the angle, bleeding altitude, coaxing the crippled jet down. Wheels kissed tarmac, sparks flew, and the aircraft skidded 300 yards before coming to rest. The canopy popped open. Smoke hissed around her. She climbed out slowly, heart pounding, the world spinning in silence. Aftermath, when she finally stepped onto solid ground, the base erupted with cheers. Crewmen ran toward her, Morales leading the pack. You're insane, he shouted over the noise, grinning. Yeah, she said, pulling off her helmet. But it worked. Harkins approached last. The old arrogance was gone. What stood in its place was something deeper: pride, respect, maybe even gratitude. He extended his hand. Welcome home, Valkyrie. She shook it. Next time, sir, maybe send someone else. Not a chance, he said. There's only one of you. That night, the flight line was quiet again. The damaged F-22 sat under floodlights, scarred but whole like its pilot. Rhodes leaned against the railing, staring at the horizon. She wasn't thinking about medals or promotions. She was thinking about the men who'd made it home, the storm she'd outrun, and the sky that still waited above her. Chief Morales joined her, hands in his pockets. You know, he said softly, every SEAL on this base swears they heard your jet before they saw it. Said it sounded like thunder. Rhodes smiled. Thunder's just the sound of something breaking through the air. Yeah, he said. Or maybe it's the sound of Valkyrie coming back. She didn't answer. She just watched the stars until they blurred into the dark, the wind carrying the faint scent of jet fuel and rain, reminding her that for some souls, peace isn't found on the ground. It's earned in the sky. For 48 hours, the base was electric. Reporters camped outside the gates. Every newsfeed in the country replayed the same grainy footage: Rhodes' damaged F-22 sliding down the runway, her silhouette stepping through smoke. The headline read, Valkyrie returns. Inside, the mood was pride mixed with disbelief. Crews painted a small thunderbolt beneath the Raptor's cockpit. SEALs stopped her in corridors to shake her hand. Even pilots from rival squadrons dropped by the hangar just to look at the machine that had defied every tactical textbook. But in Washington, the story sounded different. Unauthorized incursion, one report said. Violation of airspace treaties, another. The same action that had saved 11 lives was now described as reckless. The summons at 0600, a coded message arrived for Admiral Harkins. Immediate directive: Captain Amelia Rhodes to report to D.C. for review before Joint Command Board. He stared at the screen a long moment before forwarding it to her. Orders, was all his note said. When she stepped into his office, he was pacing. I tried to stall them, he said. Didn't work. They want someone to answer for the incursion. Rhodes crossed her arms. So they'll hang the pilot who succeeded instead of the ones who hesitated? Politics, he muttered. They can't punish a rescue that made the news, but they can question procedure. You'll have to defend every decision. She gave a dry smile. Sir, that's all I've ever done. The flight to Washington. The government jet felt colder than any combat cockpit. Through the small window, she watched cloud layers drift like armor plates, thinking of the valley, the sound of missiles, the silence after the last explosion. A young staff colonel sat across from her, expression polite but distant. They'll ask if you received direct authorization for the strike, he said. I didn't. They'll ask why you ignored recall order. I had men on the ground. He adjusted his tie. They won't like that answer. Rhodes turned back to the window. They don't have to. The hearing. The room was carved from marble and tension. A semicircle of uniforms and suits faced her. Cameras recorded everything for classified archival review. Captain Rhodes, the chairman began. You are charged with violation of Engagement Protocol 17C and cross-theater entry without clearance. Do you acknowledge these actions? I acknowledge them, she said evenly. And you justify them? I do. Murmurs rippled through the panel. One civilian member leaned forward. Captain, are you aware your actions could have escalated a regional conflict? Rhodes held his gaze. With respect, sir, conflict had already escalated for the men trapped in that valley. Another general cut in. Why didn't you wait for confirmation from command? Because confirmation would have come too late. A long silence followed. Papers shuffled. Someone coughed. Finally, the chairman spoke. The record will show that Captain Rhodes admits full responsibility. Deliberations will continue. As she stood to leave, a familiar voice echoed from the gallery. She saved American lives. It was Chief Morales. He wasn't supposed to be there, but he was standing tall in dress blues, refusing to be quiet until security ushered him out. The panelists exchanged looks. None met her eyes. The waiting they kept her in D.C. for 3 days, while recommendations circulated. She walked the Potomac at night, thinking about how easily courage turned to controversy once headlines faded. On the third morning, Harkins arrived unannounced. He looked exhausted but determined. They're divided, he said. Half want to promote you. Half want to ground you permanently. I argued for the first half. She smiled faintly. And which half wins? He handed her a sealed envelope. You'll find out when you open it. Inside was a single line. Captain Amelia Rhodes reassigned temporary suspension of flight status pending review. Her chest tightened, but she nodded. Could have been worse. It's temporary, Harkins said. I'll fix it. She folded the paper carefully. Don't. If I've learned anything, it's that fixing things sometimes breaks them more. Back on base, when she returned, the applause had faded into an uneasy quiet. People weren't sure whether to celebrate her or pity her. Her Raptor was grounded, roped off with yellow tape while investigators combed through flight data. Morales found her staring at it. They treat it like a crime scene, he said. In their eyes, it is. He hesitated. You ever think about walking away? Every day. So why don't you? She glanced toward the horizon. Because someone always needs help somewhere. If I quit, who answers next time? Morales nodded. Then we wait till they remember that. The leaked recording 2 nights later, everything changed again. A classified clip from the rescue mission appeared online, her voice over the comms, calm amid chaos. Stay low. Cover's not clear yet. Negative, I can land it. The internet exploded. Hashtags, tributes, interviews from rescued soldiers. Public opinion turned in a single day. Valkyrie became a rallying cry for courage over bureaucracy. By dawn, the Pentagon's phone lines were flooded. Senators demanded explanations. Harkins called her at 070. "Oh, you didn't leak it, did you?" "Wouldn't know how," she said. He sighed. "Good, because now they want you back, not to punish you, but to parade you." She frowned. "A medal fixes everything?" "Not everything," he said softly. "But it keeps you in the sky." The ceremony a week later, under a blue-white flag and camera flashes, Captain Amelia Rhodes stood at attention as his silver medal was pinned to her chest. Reporters shouted questions. The official speech praised initiative, bravery, and unwavering service. She barely heard any of it. Her eyes found Morales in the crowd, smiling proudly, and Harkins beside him, his posture no longer rigid but respectful. When the anthem ended, she saluted, turned, and stepped down. Reporters swarmed, asking what came next. "I'll fly again," she said simply. "Not because of medals, because that's what I was born to do." The offer that evening, Harkins visited her quarters with a new envelope. Joint Command wants to form a rapid response unit mixed branch, fast deployment. They want you to lead the air wing. Rhodes looked at the letter, then back at him. "You're serious?" "Completely. Call sign Valkyrie isn't a secret anymore. They want it on the nose of every jet in that squadron." She hesitated. "They once punished me for thinking too fast. Now they want me to teach others how." He smiled. "That's how change starts." She opened the window. The night air smelled of rain and jet fuel, the scent that had followed her through every victory and failure. "Then let's build it right," she said. Epilogue of the part later. Alone in the hangar, she walked up to the Raptor one more time. Investigators were gone. The yellow tape hung loose. She touched the metal just above the Thunderbolt symbol. For the first time in weeks, she felt peace, not the peace of silence, but of purpose. Morale's voice echoed behind her. "They're calling the new Squadron Valkyrie flight. Has a nice ring." She smiled. "Let's hope none of them have to live up to the name." He chuckled. "They won't. But if they ever do, they'll know who showed them how." Outside, lightning flashed on the horizon, illuminating the runway. It looked like the world itself saluting. And somewhere in that thunder, the legend of Valkyrie kept flying no longer as rumor, but as the sound of courage refusing to land. The first morning at Valkyrie Flight's new operations center felt like stepping into a storm before the storm. Rows of monitors, jet schematics, and tactical boards filled the room. Young pilots, some fresh from flight school, others veterans of countless sorties, watched her quietly. They had heard the legends. Now they were expected to follow the woman who had earned the call sign in blood and fire. Captain Amelia Rhodes moved along the rows with precision, inspecting equipment, checking readiness reports, and asking pointed questions. Every word carried authority. Every glance demanded attention. "Flight lead?" she asked, stopping in front of a young pilot, barely 22. "Sir, ma'am, Captain Rhodes," he stammered, straightening. "Don't call me sir," she said sharply. "I'm your lead, not your rank. I answer for my pilots. You answer for your skills. Do not confuse the two." He nodded, swallowing his surprise. The rest of the squadron adjusted immediately. Her reputation wasn't a tale. They could feel the intensity radiating from her. The team, by mid-morning, Rhodes had learned each pilot's strengths and weaknesses. Lieutenant Harper was fearless in low visibility conditions, but sometimes reckless. Lieutenant Chun had the fastest reaction time she'd ever seen, but lacked patience under sustained stress. Lieutenant Santos had exceptional accuracy, but struggled with improvisation. She memorized them all, mapping every skill against every possible scenario. Valkyrie Flight wasn't just a squadron. It was a living puzzle, one she had to solve before the sky demanded perfection. Her old mentor, Chief Morales, now her second-in-command, gave her a knowing glance. "They'll push you to the edge," he said. "Just like the Raptor did." "I know," she said. "They'll either follow or crash." The first mission brief. 2 days later, the squadron gathered for their first operational briefing. A low-intensity conflict had flared along a remote border corridor. Intelligence reported a convoy moving clandestinely at night, carrying weapons and insurgents. Harkins appeared via secure video link. "Captain Rhodes, this is your first real test. You're in command of the strike and extraction. All aircraft under your direction." Rhodes studied the map projected before her. Valleys, ridges, and satellite overlays blinked red. She traced the convoy's path with a gloved finger. "Nighttime, low visibility approach," she said calmly. "They'll expect drones. They'll expect routine flight patterns. Valkyrie flight won't give them either. Harper, you take point on the left flank. Chun, cover the rear. Santos, stand by for precision strike. I'll handle Central Command. Every action coordinated, every exit strategy planned. Clear?" The squadron responded in unison. "Clear." Into the dark night fell like a velvet curtain over the desert. The squadron moved silently, each F-22 emerging from shadows, engines muted under stealth protocols. Rhodes led the central wing, scanning the valley below. Her HUD flickered with motion signatures, a convoy weaving between the cliffs. No friendly units in sight. The risk was immense. Detection would mean disaster. Harper's voice crackled over combs. "Lead, convoy moving faster than expected. Adjust flight vector by 15 degrees, Rhodes commanded. "Stay below radar sweep." Chun's rear cover was smooth, her jet tracing the opposite flank like a shadow. Santos waited on altitude, ready to strike if insurgents revealed a SAM battery or heavy weapon. Rhodes watched her squadron respond. They moved like one organism, instinct and training meshing seamlessly. Yet, in her mind, the stakes remained painfully real. One mistake could undo everything. The engagement suddenly, flares ignited below enemy fire detected. A SAM launcher emerged, tracking one of the F-22s. "Evasive maneuvers, Harper." Rhodes barked. "Copy, lead." She guided her squadron with split-second precision, manually overriding HUD targeting systems where necessary. A missile streaked past her left wingtip. Flares erupted, lighting the night like fireworks. "Central strike confirmed," Santos reported. "SAM neutralized." Rhodes didn't celebrate. She focused on the convoy, her mind racing through contingencies. The insurgents were clever, unpredictable. Every movement mattered. Minutes stretched like hours as the squadron struck simultaneously precision strikes on vehicles carrying weapons, coordinated extractions for detainees, and suppression of mobile SAM units. When the dust cleared, the convoy was disabled, no civilian casualties recorded, and the extraction team safely retrieved. Valkyrie flight had executed the operation flawlessly. The aftermath back at base, the squadron debriefed. Rhodes sat quietly, listening to reports, noting small errors and successes alike. She praised when deserved, corrected when necessary, but never over-celebrated. Leadership, she knew, was measured in discipline, not applause. "First night in the field," Morales said quietly. "Not bad." She nodded. "They flew well. But they don't understand yet every sortie from now on will test more than skill. It will test courage under fire. No one survives by following orders alone." The young pilots exchanged glances. They had followed a legend tonight, and they had seen firsthand what the name Valkyrie meant. Respect for her was no longer whispered, it was lived. The price of legend that night, Rhodes stood alone on the flight line, staring at the desert horizon. Engines hummed faintly in the distance, each plane a guardian over an unseen battlefield. Even after victory, she felt the weight of expectation. Being Valkyrie meant more than flying missions. It meant responsibility for every life under her wing, every split-second decision, every consequence of action and inaction. Her eyes drifted to the stars. She thought about Iron Dusk, Falcon 3, the SEALs she had saved. She thought about the men she had yet to protect, the ones who would call her name in panic and hope. She had led her first mission, proven her squadron could fly as one, and yet the storm was far from over. Because being Valkyrie was not a medal. It was a covenant. And the sky was never forgiving. The morning air was crisp, carrying a chill that hinted at the desert winter to come. Valkyrie flight gathered silently on the runway, engines humming like a predator waiting to strike. Captain Amelia Rhodes ran her eyes over every jet, every pilot, every detail of the operation. Today was no routine mission. Intelligence had intercepted chatter, suggesting a high-value target had entered a hostile zone, a location heavily fortified and near civilian settlements. Failure was not an option, and success would demand every ounce of skill, courage, and instinct she had honed over years in the cockpit. She climbed into her jet last, the canopy sealing with a hiss that sounded louder than it should have in the quiet morning. Chief Morales was already in his seat, calm but alert. "Eyes sharp, Captain," he said. "This one's going to test them all." "I know," she replied. Her fingers danced over the controls, reviewing flight paths and sensor overlays one last time. "They're ready." "Are we?" Morales nodded. "You taught them well. Now let's see if the legend holds." The jets roared down the tarmac, rising in unison toward the pale light of dawn. The squadron spread into formation, Valkyrie in the lead, cutting a path into the unknown. Below, the desert stretched for miles, each ridge and canyon a potential trap, every shadow a threat. Rhodes' mind was a mixture of calm and calculation, anticipation and memory. She remembered Iron Dusk, Falcon 3, the faces of SEALs saved by instinct and defiance. She had survived those moments, not because she had been fearless, but because she had acted decisively when hesitation could have killed them all. Today, history would demand the same courage from her and her squadron. Hours passed with the sun rising behind them, casting long shadows across jagged terrain. The first contact came suddenly. Ground sensors picked up armored vehicles, maneuvering into ambush positions along the canyon floor. Rhodes' fingers moved instinctively, directing her pilots, coordinating altitude and angle, calling out threats before they became lethal. "Harper, take the left flank." "Chun, cover rear." "Santos, precision strike on the SAM battery." Each command was sharp, precise, executed with the kind of split-second timing that had earned her the call sign Valkyrie. As the first missiles detonated, shaking the canyon walls, insurgents opened fire with everything they had. Rhodes dove her F-22 low, hugging terrain, weaving through anti-air fire like a phantom. The young pilots followed her lead, every move a lesson in trust, skill, and fearlessness. Smoke and dust billowed below, the air filled with the smell of fuel and sand. Rhodes' mind was clear. Only the mission existed. Only the lives at stake mattered. Suddenly, one of the pilots screamed over Comschon's jet had taken a direct hit. The stabilizers shuddered violently, alarms blaring. Rhodes' heart skipped, but she kept her voice steady. "Chun, maintain altitude. Focus on control surfaces. Morales, cover her." She guided her squadron through the chaos, weaving around enemy fire, locking the SAMs, suppressing the armored vehicles, giving the damaged jet time to regain stability. Sweat ran down her temples, her fingers gripping the control stick so tightly her knuckles turned white. She remembered every failed flight, every mission where she had been the last line between life and death. Today, That memory fueled her precision. Minutes stretched like hours. Explosions rocked the canyon. Jets screamed. Ground fire erupted in waves. Yet Valkyrie flight moved as one. Rhodes called the shots, but each pilot acted with instinct, training, and trust, executing maneuvers that seemed impossible. They cleared the canyon floor of immediate threats and coordinated an extraction for the high-value target, an unarmed civilian who had been caught in the crossfire. As the convoy of allies and the target vehicle moved toward safety, a new threat appeared. A hidden SAM battery, previously undetected, activated with deadly intent. Rhodes' jet shuddered under a near miss. Alarm screamed. She had seconds to act. Pulling the aircraft into a steep climb, she deployed countermeasures, releasing flares in a precise pattern. Another missile streaked past, missing by meters. Lead, SAM batteries active. Harper's voice was sharp over the comm. Copy. Engage manually. Rhodes barked. She guided her jet into an attack run that would have been suicidal if not for every calculation in her brain working perfectly. The SAM battery erupted in a controlled explosion, its rockets no longer a threat. The squadron screened past the canyon, narrowly avoiding debris, and emerged into open sky above the desert, triumphant but exhausted. The extraction team made it to safety, the target unharmed. Rhodes exhaled, allowing herself a brief moment of relief. Morale's voice came over the comm, low but warm. Captain, you did it. All of you. They returned to base in silence, each pilot too drained to speak, yet filled with awe for the woman who had led them, who had turned chaos into precision and fear into courage. As they landed, the hangar erupted in applause. Every crew member, every SEAL, every pilot who had doubted or underestimated her now stood and cheered. Valkyrie flight had returned victorious, their legend cemented in real time. Admiral Harkins was there, standing at the edge of the runway. His eyes, usually stern and unreadable, glimmered with respect. When Rhodes climbed from her jet, he approached her quietly. Captain Amelia Rhodes, he said, voice steady but soft, you've shown what leadership, courage, and instinct truly mean. Valkyrie flight is now more than a call sign. It's a standard. She nodded, exhausted but unbroken. Thank you, sir. I couldn't have done it without them. She gestured toward her squadron, who were still debriefing, but whose faces were radiant with pride. The Admiral's jaw tightened, a rare show of humility. You've changed more than a mission today. You've changed the way we see courage. Later, in the quiet of the hangar, Rhodes stood alone beside her Raptor, battered but intact, its paint scorched in places from the explosions. She ran her fingers along its metal surface, thinking of every life saved, every decision made in a split second, and the countless moments that had led to this one. Chief Morales came up behind her, his presence silent but grounding. You did what they said couldn't be done, he said softly. Didn't do it for them? She replied. Did it for the people in the canyon, for the men who needed someone to answer their call. He nodded. They'll never forget you. I don't want them to, she said, her eyes returning to the horizon. The sky was vast, endless, filled with the promise of new challenges and unseen dangers. She had faced impossible odds before, and she would do it again. Valkyrie was more than a call sign. It was a covenant, a bond between pilot and sky, between courage and responsibility. As the sun set behind the mountains, Rhodes climbed into the cockpit once more, fingers on the controls, heart steady. Somewhere down below, the world waited, unpredictable and unforgiving. Somewhere up above, the sky demanded vigilance. Somewhere in the middle, Valkyrie flew, a living legend, ready to answer the next call. And so the name echoed across deserts, canyons, and airbases alike. Valkyrie fearless, unwavering, and unbroken. The story of Captain Amelia Rhodes concludes with her legend fully cemented. She is no longer just a call sign whispered among SEALs. She is the symbol of courage, precision, and leadership, ready to face any storm the sky throws her way.